Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.
Good afternoon, Team Krulak community, and on behalf of Marine Corps University, the Marine Corps University Foundation, and the Krulak Center for Innovation and Future Warfare, welcome back to the Brewcast, our series designed to connect the worlds of the warfighter and PME with the best in innovative and creative thought. I'm your host, Major Ian Brown, Operations Officer at the Krulak Center. Before we begin, please remember that all opinions expressed here are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Krulak Center, Marine Corps University, the United States Marine Corps, the German Armed Forces, or any other agency of the U.S. or German governments. So for our guest today, we are happy to welcome back for an encore Team Krulak non-resident fellow, Colonel Sönke Marahrens. Colonel Marahrens is the Director of the Community of Interest, Strategy and Defense Hybrid Center of Excellence, European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats, and I hope I got most of that correct. He is a trained air defense officer and held various positions, including Battalion Command, Defense Planning Office, and at the Ministry of Defense. His past writing is focused on innovation, concept development, and experimentation of applied military scientific issues in the field of cyber and digitization. In 2018, he graduated from the Canadian National Security Program with a Master's in Public Administration. His current work focuses on aspects of leadership, leadership processes, and leadership in the 21st century, modern forms of conflict, cyber, artificial intelligence, and the military, as well as the Prussian war game. Today, he's going to focus on that last topic, where we'll be looking at the origins of the Prussian kriegsspiel in To Dice or Not to Dice. Sir, it's great to have you back here on the Brewcast, and I'm going to go ahead and pull your slides up and turn it over to you.
Ian, thank you very much for the invitation and also for the kind introduction. Go into what I present to the audience today is the result of two masters I've written over the last 4 years. I had the chance to join two programs, one by accident, the other on purpose. And I had the chance to work with the only professor I know in Germany who went back to study the Prussian kriegsspiel. And he gave me the chance to compare Prussian kriegsspiel rule sets from 1824 to 1874. And this is where my presentation today comes from. So it's about truth, comedy, and myth, because there's a lot of stories about it and around it. And whenever you have a question, put it in the chat and I will try to answer them. You can have the presentation later on, of course. And if you have more questions, just send me an email and I will try to answer to my best. So the game at all is a three-party game by the way it was defined. So you have a side blue, you have a side red, and you have the Empire who is running the game. You could play the game on one map, then the parties will be standing on the left and on the right side. But the best setup would be if you have 3 rooms and there's a master map with the leaders team in the middle, and blue and red have their own rooms, and they are corresponding with each other through a messaging system. One of the great challenges, and therefore I see it still great for today, especially when we talk about the digital soldier. In this game, you have to maintain situational awareness. The reality on the master map might be quite different from what you have tracked on your system, and this is something to understand. Furthermore, you can learn to calculate the movements. So the idea of room, space, and time is really something you can get out of this game. By the rules, the leader is almighty. There's no discussion during the game. There might be always a discourse at the end of the game, but when the leader is deciding this happened that way, then it's the way to be, and therefore don't fight the setting. To be fair, being a leader of a game is a lot of work. It's hard work, and it has always been hard work. So all my sources always complain about that there were not enough people who were able to run such a game. To be fair, don't lose friends during those games. So it could be very heated, even in your own team. If your leader of the cavalry is not doing what you expect him to do, this might cause friendship, so be careful, don't lose friends. And at the end, and this is the most important thing, the game was never meant to be about winning. It's all about deciding. And it uses the motivation of winning and losing. But Reiswitz himself said, in his rules, this is not, it's not the one who wins a certain battle, it's the winner of the night. The winner of the night is the one, or the he or the she, who was able to run through the game, to run through her command and control cycle, to run through the order loop, to understand the situation, because the outcome is driven by dice. So, and this is not about winning and losing, this is about making correct decisions. So the protagonists of the Prussian Kriegsspiel, there are some before von Reiswitz Senior, but he's the first one to set up, you could say, a full set, and he was able to interest the Prussian king to it. His son takes over his ideas in 1824, and he adds the dice, and he adds the so-called Prussian general map with the resolution of 1 to 8,000. In 1828, Karl von Decker and Claymore August Ferdinand von Witzleben, they are publishing a supplement of the 1824 game. And the supplement is quite interesting because they founded committees during 1826 and 1827, and they went into every detail of the game. And from this expert, you could call it a concept development and experimentation idea in evaluating the game, they came up with some new ideas. In 1846, the Berlin Kriegsspiel Association published a new set, which directly derives from Reiswitz and from the Decker-Witzleben game in honor of the three before them. And they said, due to the fact that you can't buy those rules any longer in the normal bookstores, this is why we set up this game. Then there must be a short, another set of Weigelt. This is something we only know because it's mentioned by von Ciszewicz, but nobody has seen it so far. And Wilhelm von Ciszewicz in 1862 takes all the rule sets before him and he cuts everything out of them, cutting them from 110 paragraphs down to 60, because he said, if you are a military officer, you must have an understanding how artillery, infantry, and other stuff is working. And for this, I only reduce the game to the rules you need to set up a game. The military thinking inside the game must be brought by the Team Blue and Team Red. And there you could see a little change, because before it was not only a game for the military, it was also used in civilian societies. And with the von Ciszewicz rules, you need a certain understanding of the military. Thilo von Trotter is von Ciszewicz at that time is a first lieutenant. Von Trotter is a colonel, and he also publishes his set in 1870. And the difference between von Ciszewicz and von Trotter, Trotter still believed in the power of the sword. And he said von Ciszewicz, his rules were too much based on rifles and guns, but the true power lies in the infantry. And I think Felix Lotzin will love that. And the infantry and the cavalry are fighting with a so-called blank weapon with the sword. Jakob Meckel in 1873 is a teacher at the military academy in Hanover, and he criticizes Ciszewicz and von Trotter because he used it for a different purpose. He used it for teaching people, and from his point of view, there were two main criticisms. One was it was not exact enough for him, so he asked for more rules. And at a certain point, he also said the problem with the dice is if I'm teaching, and for example, I want to teach a cavalry attack, and now the die comes back and saying I'm losing. So I can't use this as a teaching tool. So the dice are not good for the purpose. And Verdi de Vinois in 1876, he's a colonel, gets promoted in 1876 to brigadier general and becomes later on the Prussian Secretary for Defense. He says, I don't need dice at all. If I do a real world exercise, there are no dice, and I will tell how good my people are, so get rid of the dice. And this is the idea between rigid and free wargaming. But my conclusion, and I will provide you my thoughts of that, at the end is that the rigid wargame is more free than the free wargame. Von Neumann is another first lieutenant, and he takes on the idea from Chischwitz and creates another dice-based game. So what you normally find in literature, that in 1875 there was this clear cut, and 1876 of Verdi Vinois, no dice any longer. It's not correct for the Prussians. They still run war games with the dice. So for a kriegsspiel, to conduct one, you need a map on the left side. The resolution was 1 to 8,000. This maintains until 1870. And you need the dice, and the dice you're seeing in the middle are special dice. These dice were constructed by von Reiswitz, and I will explain them later on. The later games use normal dice with 1 to 6. And of course, you need this kind of peons, tokens, for the blue side and the red side. They are marked so that you can distinguish between artillery, cavalry. There are even more possible, but normally it would be enough if you have cavalry units, artillery units, and infantry units. So if you would buy a full game, and I calculated this during my master's thesis, in 1870, you have to pay an amount of 2,500 US dollars of today. And by this, you could understand that an association at that time or an officers club, they didn't have the means to buy a new game. And this was also criticism against Meckel, because Meckel wanted to change from 1 to 8,000 to 1 to 80,000 maps. And by this, you have to throw away everything you have in your war game set. And if you can see the amount of money, that would be quite an expensive enterprise. So the sequence of the events, there's an initial situation, and I will present one to you, which is very short normally. There's a first order, which is prepared 24 hours to 48 hours before the game, and is then given to the players on the game night. And then there's the conduct of the game. And the original game was played in turns. Every turn equals 2 minutes. This was later risen to 5 minutes. And if we are playing it today, we're still in a 10 minutes time frame, because to maintain 2 minutes, you must be really fast. When I tried to do this in Canada, I played 10 turns of 2 minutes. And at the end, it took me 120 minutes just for the 10 turns. So if you're not used to play the game, this is really hard to reach. During the game, you have the movements on the map, and at the moment, units are confronting each other, and there is a chance of an attack. The players have to tell the leading team they want to attack, and then the attacks will be decided. Then the losses will be decided, and I will come to that. Then the losses will be noted on a piece of paper. And then if you have enough losses, you have to take tokens from the field. Like I said, the one who runs the game is a dictator. There's no discussions. And most important, every Kriegsspiel ends with a debriefing, because it's not a game, it's a tactical game. And for this, the leader has to sum up what had happened over the game. So he runs through the games and he makes some notes at certain points in time. What was important, what was not important. And this must be given by the tactical leader. So this is not about, like I said, about winning and losing. This is about understanding what was happening during the battle. So the game pieces, a battalion piece at that time equals 800 men, an escadron 150 horses, and a battery from the artillery at the beginning were 4 guns, later 6 guns. On the right-hand side, you see something I found in a German military newspaper. These are the tokens if you want to run, I think it was a full corps. So a full corps consists of 446 tokens. And then as a leader of a game, because you need the set 2 times in blue and in red, it drives you mad. I can grant this. So this would be a normal setup. And you can see the first paragraph, the first 2 paragraphs are for blue, and the second 2 paragraphs are for east. This is the initial situation given to the leader of Team Blue and given to the leader of Team Red, only the parts of it, and they have to write the first disposition. So this is in today the eastern part of Germany, close to Leipzig. And for example, the map set of Königgrätz or the Battle of Sadowa, which was a decisive battle in the War of 1866, which is called the German War between the Prussian and the Austrian. This map consisted out of 105 pages. So from there, the first thing, the leaders in every team on its own has to do their movements on the map. And for this, you have this kind of ruler, which you can see on the right side, where you can see the paces for galloping horses or walk and trot, and the velocity of the movement velocity or movement speed was also distinguished. So you cannot do always gallop, but you could have a mixture of walk and trot. And the army, for example, the infantry walked, but they could also do a fast walk over a certain period. And in the middle, you can see the speed diagram. And this is something everyone had to understood. And every team is doing their own work. And the team leaders of blue and red can order, what do you call it, a melder, someone out to ask another commander where he is, or to send it to another unit to get the exact position where they are in the real world. Because like I said in the beginning, the three maps are not the same. And it's really great today with taking photos at the same time. It's always interesting how far you have deviation between the master map and blue and red map. Over the period of 1824 to 1874, the rules were adapted with regards to range of the artillery and the rifles in accordance with the state of the art. And until 1870, they used pace. So if you use an older rule set, this is 0.75 meters. In 1872, I think, the Prussian introduced the meter as the symmetric system. And from there, all the rule sets changed from paces to meter. So, and there you can see it's a simple order. You start with your initial orders. It's on the left side. You put it. You put on the turn. So it's turn 1 and the starting time. And these are the initial orders. And later on, after these orders are given, you're just acting with a small sheet you see on the right side. You have to put a time on it from whom you're ordering someone, who is ordering, and who get this. And this goes to the leader team. And the leader team, they have to calculate how long does it take to move the order from position A to position B, and when it gets effective. And then if they have to send a report back, they also have to calculate. So now this, the signaler, it takes him 15 minutes, or the rider, to bring this back to the commander. So the report doesn't come at the time it's written. It might be 7 turns later. So here you can also see that you really experience time. And from my experience from gaming, there's sometimes nothing is happening, and sometimes everything comes together. And I think everyone who's a military has a clear understanding what I'm talking. That's really the real world in there. Next slide, please. So the starting values at that time for a platoon was 48 points, which is later important. 48 points for a company, but the playing type was a battalion. So yes, 4 times 48. A cavalry escadron 60 points, and an artillery battery has 25 points. So when you run below 0, you have to take them out piece by piece. So now we come to the wonder weapon, the so-called von Reiswitz dice. And with this, he explains almost everything. Everything what you need to playing the game is on those dice, and you can order the dice you see on the upper left side in England. So on the left side, so the first thing you have to do is to decide in the von Reiswitz rules, what do I have? Do I have an infantry fight, or do I have an artillery fighting? So if it's infantry, you take dice 1 and 2. If it's artillery, it's dice 3 and 5. So that's one part of it. But the first dice, and that's the difference, for example, to the game Risk, is about the force ratio. Dice number 1 equals 1 to 1. So it's 3 battalions versus 3 battalions. And dice number 2 equals 2 to 3. Dice number 3, I think, is 3 to 1. And this goes on. And I have a slide later on which translates it. And the initial idea is not in the way it's done in Risk. You have to dice. So you are the attacker. And now it will be diced whether your attack is successful or unsuccessful. That's the first dice. And on the 1 by 1, you can see in the upper left corner, there are 3 planes of the dice are black and 3 are white. And by this, it decided whether your attack is successful or is unsuccessful. So that's the first dice. The second, then you have to dice again. And you can take the same dice, because now you have to look whether it's infantry or artillery. So you take the appropriate dice. For example, for infantry, you can maintain dice number 1. And then you throw it again. And then you can see that at 100 steps, you are causing 30 points damage. If you were successful, if you were unsuccessful, you're suffering 30 points. On 200 steps, 300 steps, you can see this on the left side. If you have deployed skirmishers, which is platoon size taking out of the half battalion, then the points are a little bit less because they have a better position in the field. And the red triangle, this was for artillery. If the artillery fires into a village, whether the village is burning or not. That's the idea of the red circle. And then you see the letter. There were 3 letters. One is about retreat, one is about defeat, and one is about total defeat. And I will come to this later on. And in the middle, if you have a frontal attack, so a direct attack after the firing of the guns or the rifles, you have the damage by the sword, by at that time man-by-man combat. Later on, they went rid of this kind of dice and they used the normal dice. And here you can see the ratios of dice number 1 to dice number 5, which you had to select for the first move. So to modify the ratio, this is the art of the leadership team, because now you have to find out what is the position of the artillery. Do they have a favorable position? Do they have an unfavorable position? Is the infantry attacking cavalry and so on? And for this, you have to look in all the rules, which I marked on the left side, which goes from, now it's 10 pages of rules, which is changing the dice. So for example, if you have an unfavorable position, there might be that it says, okay, it will be 4 dice worse. So if you are in a position at the beginning, you have 4 to 1, and now it says it takes away 4 dice, suddenly you have a 1 to 1 ratio, because the other side has a better position. And this is derived from the rules. And to be fair, this derives your map. So in 1828, and I think you know those discussions if you are a wargamer, what is about heroism? Because the von Reiswitz game is all about keeping the war, keeping the battle together, using force for attrition. And the guys in 1826 know we need something like heroism. For example, the platoon leader who is able to sneak into an artillery position and is able to take out this artillery position. So they came up with an idea. They used another set of dice after, especially for this case, and you have to declare this as an exception or emergency throw. And the idea out of this, the small dice you see in the middle of the pictures, they have only the numbers on one plane. So they used a dice with one plane 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So in order to do or to get your success, you have to dice these 5 dice. And if you have more than a result higher than 7, if you sum them up, then your exception throw was successful. So, and not to make this rule the normal, they decided, so if you're doing this, if you are failing, your token will be taken away from the map. If you are successful, the enemy's token will taken away, but your token will also taken away. This prevents the game to run into a permanent emergency and exception throw. So to run a this kind of exception throw, you have first die one number 6, which was 1 to 5. So one side in your favor, 5 against you. If you were successful, then you had to use the Schimmel dice and throw more than 7 eyes on the dice. If you calculate this, the probability to be successful is 6.5%. But there's a chance to be a hero on the battlefield. This is where you get the medals. Later on, they stick to the normal dice, the one we know, the 6 plain dice. And this is only about probability. So the probability is 1 to 6. Of course, in modern war games, you have planes with 20, so dice with 20 planes and so on. This is only how you put your probability on the dice, and they choose to take it with 1 by 6. And this is also the importance of understanding the use of the dice, which someone is not grasping. Dice do not allow the impossible. They only provide you a situation which is less probable. And on the other hand, if you calculate this, 1 by 1, 1 by 3, 1 by 4. And the rule was 1 battalion equals 2 escadrons equals half a battery, if you want to calculate the results. And von Tischwitz later on came up with this table, and you see 11. This is only the ratio. And the ratio, then you can calculate, for example, if blue has 5, take the upper row of 5, and red has 8. Now you find the row and the column. You can see that you have to choose dice number 2. This is the idea. If the ratio is 11 to 1, at that time, there was no dice for this. There was the understanding if the ratio goes above 1 to 5, again, you have to first dice number 6, and then you have to take the dice for a ratio 8 to 1, which is depicted. So then you have to rethrow, for example, this dice number 5 to be successful. Same like with the emergency throw, only with normal dice here. And if this was done, you had to throw again, and now it's about the losses. And the losses had on it, like I said before, also the letters. And this prevents wedging. Whoever has played Risk knows that at a certain point in time, you're attacking your enemy, you have 14 infantries, and the other side have 10. And then you throw as long as the other side still stays at a certain point in time, you run over them. Here, the idea of retreat, defeat, and total defeat is that you're not allowed, if you come up with a result of, for example, defeat, that you have to go back. You have to break the combat situation. And if it's total defeat, it takes you up to 4 rounds to be capable of war fighting again. And this prevents wedging of forces on the battlefield. And then the next thing on the right side, you see the table for the losses. The lower side, when von Reiswitz still had only 100, 200, 300, 400 in 1874, now suddenly you have distances up to 1,600 meters, which equals a mile. And for this, and you can see the lower line on 1,600 meter, 1 mile. If you dice, there are no losses, but if you come closer, the losses become higher. And these are generic points which are taken from the 48 point, for example, from one company. And it's not important which company you take at a certain point in time. If you have 48 points, you have to take one token out of the game. So, and then you have the execution. Everything runs in the middle. You are providing orders, you have to maintain orders. This is what you see on this map. On the left side, there was blue, on the right side was red. And I had to maintain overview and oversight when which message came in and when will a certain message get the information to the other room up and forward. And then at the end, you have to discuss what happened. Therefore, today, if you can take photos with a mobile phone or a camera, it's really great. You can even have a small movie if you take a photo from every move, and then you can see in a GIF how the battlefield explored. It's really a great support for a debriefing. But the debriefing is about decisions taken about the situation on the map. So my findings, like I said before, I personally believe the rigid game is more free than the later free wargaming and the one we are doing today, because using random, this only confronts the player with Clausewitz's fog of war. If you take out the game and the dice, and the leader decides how a situation is resolved, you run into arbitrary despotism and capriciousness, because you need a fair leader. And then you also have the personality. For example, if you play against a Rommel, he will always be aggressive and he will pick on you. You must be more aggressive and show me. So suddenly your behavior is not in accordance, the situation on the map is in accordance with the one who's leading the game. So 6 weeks later, you're playing against someone who's more on the secure side, and he sees you attacking, and he can suddenly say, oh, tonight I will show this guy or this lady their borders by making every move they try impossible. The only thing a younger leader or a leader is learning is that you have to adapt to your board. Okay? And I will run through. So the development of the free programming, from my point of view, and this I can prove this, was rather by laziness, because it was too complex to run the dice game rather than the necessity. What is important, Kriegsspiele were always symmetric. So there is a game between Prussia and Austria or Prussia and UK was always symmetric. They used the same weapons. The game evaluation of 2020 was really a way forward. Like I said, leading a game is still a challenge. And then we come to some, I have to come to the myth. Papa Reiswitz and the dice, you find in some works that already Father Reiswitz has used the dice. This is incorrect. In his rules, you only find attrition rates for certain situation. The problem is, if you look on the left side, this box was created by von Reiswitz the Elder. There are 3 dice, and this box was found in a castle in Berlin. So either they adapted his rules, but the original rules don't show any signs of dice. Then there's a saying that Reiswitz worked together with Scharnhorst because the losses, like I depicted them, so the probability curves of the losses were created by Reiswitz. And Reiswitz said he used Scharnhorst's work. And there's normally it's a translation mistake, because if you look into the German rules, and I had to look into it, there is a comma. He uses his own experience and Scharnhorst's experience. And some people said Reiswitz was working with Scharnhorst. That's not true, because in 1813, when Scharnhorst did his work to standardize the losses of, and to understand the losses of the infantry, Reiswitz was on a totally different place in the Prussian army. The Prussianness of the Prussian Kriegsspiel, it was always private. It was always done after hours. None of the rule sets were published by the government. None of the sets were published. They were only ordered by the governments, but they were delivered from civilian companies. Some fun stuff. When Reiswitz demonstrated his game to the Chot at that time, he ordered that every unit gets it, and the king presented it to every regiment, but there was no producer. So Reiswitz and his colleagues had to set up a production line, and they hired people to create all those games. Military at its best, of course, when this showed up, the battalion and regiment commanders took this because it was a game of the king into the cupboard in their main office. So the troops had no chance to run the game because it was a game of the king. And there's a great story about the Infantry Brigade 25. A young officer was able to convince his commander that they should set up the game, and they were able to get it out of the trunk. And at a certain point in time, they had a game at the officers' club, and the poor old captain, he had some problems in leading the game, and during the game, everyone fell drunk. So this game really ended chaos, and there's a story that this game was never played again at that Infantry Brigade 25. So, and other things, and this is also read up, you can hide in plain sight. This is a good tool to use because this is about how you can apply it. You can use it as peer-to-peer training in a group of equals. You can use it for beginners. If you, but then you need different rules. If you use it for training and education, if you want to use it as a superior officer, then you are in the control mode. This changes the chemistry and the atmosphere in the game. You could experiment new capabilities. For example, in 1870, suddenly the field telegraph showed up, or you can give a machine gun, but then you have to provide values for the machine gun, and then you can see how the troops are working with that. You can use it for the validation of plan. This was also done. You can use it for understanding history. That's Phil Seven's approach. You give a historic situation and you make people create a game out of it. So they have to dig very deep into this historic situation. You can use it for coaching of leaders, which is, from my point, very cool because you can't hide at the map. So, and if you have a coach or you're a mentor, normally you live what your mentee is telling you or your coachee. Here, you after 4 hours, he and she can't hide. And then you can reveal some of her real personality. And of course, you can use it for ethical training, but at a certain point in time, you can ask one of your leaders, sir, you just lost 2,500 soldiers for your stupid plan. How do you feel? So there's also a chance to do that. The only thing you shouldn't do is to try to change history afterwards, because this game is based, if you use dice, on fog, friction, and luck. And it's not emulating reality. Next slide. And I think that's my slide, last one. The added value of today, it's still the immersion. It causes stress and happiness. It's abstract enough that you don't come into discussion, my helicopter or my tank won't do that in the field, but it's still warfare. It's teaching the essence of leadership, of command and control, space, time, forces, and information. It shows you that planning might be trading error against fallacy. No plan survives contact with the battlefield, so flexibility, agility will be transported via the dice. You can experience a full order loop, which you can't do in normal exercises. The enemy is as smart as you are, and therefore you can use it for selection, leadership, basic training, and coaching. And it teaches complexity. And that's my last point.
First one is from either Felix Lutzen, or it says also Horrido from Hamburg. I don't know if that's a code name or something.
He's a cavalry officer. Armed reconnaissance. Armored reconnaissance.
So his question is, would you recommend to play the game as it is, or should it be modernized to keep up with current trends and doctrines?
That's my idea. Like I said, the abstractness, it's still warfare. So everyone gets an idea that it's still fighting, but it prevents you from discussion how good a certain weapon system is modeled. And you will have this discussion then with every different group you are playing. You have a modern infantry officer, you have a modern tanker, you have a helicopter pilot. Everyone tells you something different. And by going back to this kind of, you could say, basic warfighting of artillery, artillery is moving slow, fighting long range. Infantry is moving slow, fighting short range. Cavalry is moving fast, fighting short range. And this creates enough complexity to understand the basic principles. So I would leave it the game as it is. But there's no doubt that later on, if you are through it and you want to do doctrine training and so on, go to your weapon system and try to emulate them.
Great, thank you. All right, next question from Aaron Danis, and it is inside the Prussian kriegsspiel. How long did it take to write and transmit or courier, receive, and then execute an order in game terms?
Okay, what do you call someone who brings a message? The messenger. So the messenger had the same rules than the cavalry in gallop. So in one turn, he could do 900 paces. And then now you have to find out on the battlefield whether this is 1 turn, 2 turns, or 3 turns. So there's always one pin where your headquarters are, and from there it will be accounted. And then the leading, so the message goes directly to the leaderboard, and now they have to find out, okay, in 4 turns, this will show up at the subordinate headquarters. And then you have to wait, and then you have to send it back. They are sitting in the same room. They are not entitled to sit each other. So you have a main commander and maybe a commander for infantry, cavalry, and artillery. They are not entitled to talk to each other. They have to message via the middle room. This is the idea, because by this you get the understanding of time. And this also prevents micromanagement.
Next question from Gernot Friedrich is asking, what lessons can we learn from these historical war games, or learn from historical war games like this for modern war games where we use computer simulation or emulation or artificial intelligence as one of the parties actually in the game, i.e. as the opponent or the umpire?
So Gernot, my personal dream was to develop a kriegsspiel 2.0, and I have put it into innovation part, but I was always unsuccessful. I see a moderate support for example, for the messaging system, which you could do with a mobile phone, or for supporting getting the information from the battlefield, like calculating, or if you throw a dice to get the results in a faster way, that you don't have to dice every time, that you can say, okay, on a virtual map, I mark this point, that point, and the computer comes back. But I don't like to see it that the artificial game is running the game. And I also don't like to see it in the gaming group, because it takes away the immersion. And the immersion is really great. Whenever you have seen something, after 2 to 3 hours, if it's run in a certain way that you can see progress. If it gets too slow, then of course everyone is pissed off. But if you are able to run it, you have full immersion of the whole group. And this is also good for team building, and also for getting a better understanding of the stress resilience of your neighbors. And I don't want to see that taken away from the game by a computer.
No, that's great. And that covers a question I was going to ask. And it's part of the eternal struggle of, wargaming of computer versus tabletop. And that question still comes up a lot of why should we use tabletops if we have computers that can do all these calculations for us? All right, next question is actually from another one of our non-resident fellows, Group Captain Joe Brick down under in Australia. Good to see you, ma'am. And she's asking, she sees Kriegsspiel as setting a historical and cultural foundation for wargaming in the German military. Is learning how to conduct war games a part of your officer training? It's not in Australia, and we are still trying to introduce this familiarity with wargaming in Australia. And I would just dovetail off that, saying in the U.S. military, we're maybe a couple steps ahead of that, but probably not too many, certainly compared to the German tradition.
So the German tradition is broken, and we have a German Twitter group, which is called Mill Twitter. And in this, we're discussing to get it back, and Felix Lotzin is part of this, and he tried it with his company, and maybe he can say something about his experience from his company when we provided one game to them. We are not doing it. If we are doing it without, like the sandbox games, but those are led like a free war game, and then the problem of despotism, or and I think everyone has heard this. We don't have a master solution, but your solution is wrong. And that's the feeling we still have, because, and this is also part of the German tradition, German officers can't lose. So this is also why they got rid of the dice, to make it more controllable. But then it becomes a different game, because it's not a decision game any longer. It's just adapting to a master template or to something else. So I would love to see it, because with regards, we're talking about VUCA and everything else, I can create very easily VUCA on this playing field, and the people can understand it. And I can teach leadership in 5 days with 41 hours of PowerPoint, or I can teach it in 1 day of explaining it and 1 day of gaming. And I have the self-experience. I'm not talking about riding a bike. I let them ride the bike. So these are the advantages I see in there. I hope this answers the question. And sorry, we are not doing it. We have to do it from my point of view.
Oh, thank you very much. And yeah, I think the heaven forbid that we lose is an unspoken undercurrent, and I'm not going to say all resistance, but it's certainly there, because it was showing nobody likes to show their rear end in front of their peers or their superiors in that manner. Okay, that I got no more questions in the chat here. That's sort of you pretty much covered all the ones that I came up with in your presentation. So I'm happy to let you have any final closing comments, sir, for today.
I'm grateful to be here another time, and thank you for organizing it. And everyone who has a question, please send me an email. You can, like I said before, because not everyone was in there, you can have the presentation. If there are questions, ask me. The rules were translated in 1872. The Trotter rule set and the von Chischwitz rule set of that time into English. You can find them on Google. But if you have questions in applying them, just send me, and if you tried something, send me an email. I did this with other folks, so I can mentor it. But to be fair, if I'm running a game, I have to look up everything on my own still. haven't memorized everything, but I like to support it. And for the German group, if there's an interest that we should do this in German as well in another audience, please send me an email. We can do that.
Great, thank you. And to your point about the presentation to the audience, I have digital copies. So what I'll do is when I post this up on our website, I'll make sure to include the presentation as an attachment so you all can download it and look at it on your own. All right. Okay. So, sir, appreciate your time, especially in the evening, as well as being kind of under the weather on your end, to come and talk to us again. And to everyone in our audience, again, thank you for chiming in and for all of your questions to our guest. I'll put out a pitch for next week on January 24th. Krulak Center will be helping the Middle East Studies again host jointly one of their Middle East Studies lecture series. This will be the first one for calendar year 22. And the theme is going to be the Eastern Mediterranean and the crosshairs, regional, political, and security issues and challenges to U.S. foreign policy. The guest lecturer is Dr. Dimitrios Triantafylou, Professor of International Relations and Director of the Center for International and European Studies at Kadir Has University, where he discusses and teaches ongoing security issues and political tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean. So that's already gone out on our social media channels, and we'll be highlighting that in the coming days as well. So we hope you can all join us then. Thank you.
All right, good night, and thank you to you.
Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.